Hello again, YouTubers. This is M1 Grandman, aka Waylon Jennings, here to talk to you about AK magazines. This is not going to be an all-inclusive review, just a review of what I have. So, we want to take a quick look over here. We got some Chinese mags. This one here is a Yugo, a Romanian, two Soviet bakelites, and a Bulgarian, and that one's for the 5.56. We have some East German pouches and a Romanian 75 round drum in the drum pouch. Real quick, we'll go over pouches first. This one's for the AK-47. You'll notice it's got a curve to it, and that's to fit the curved mag bodies. And then this is your AK-74 style pouch. It's straight because the magazines have much less of a curve. The magazines will interchange in the pouches. The AK-47 mags come in and out of the straight pouch better than the AK-74 mags come out of the curved pouch. But if you stick to the correct pouch for the correct mags, the AK-47 pouch, the AK-74 pouch, shouldn't have any problems. Another way to identify them is look on the back. Some of these AK-47 ones will be set up at an angle. I believe that's so that these can be worn on the left side. That way they'll still tilt toward your left hand, which you reload with. And then you can definitely see the fact that this is straight, this one's curved. This one also has a place to put a clean kit on it. On the inside, you have a retention strap. And down in there, there's a couple other slots. Those are supposed to be I thought they were for cleaning rods, but apparently stripper clips, the 15 round AK-74 stripper clips fit in there perfectly. I imagine you could probably get enough stripper clips in there to fill all these magazines with. Why you would save the stripper clips, I don't know. It has something to do with Soviet doctrine that I just haven't discovered yet in my collecting. Brief overview here. There are some differences in the followers. You can find that out online. I'm not going to strip all the rounds out of these to show you. It's kind of mundane anyway. But quick overview of the magazines. The Chinese ones are the most interesting because I have all three that cover the entire production of the AK-47 mags from China. We have the early ribbed back, what they call a Sino-Soviet mag. You'll notice that it also has the European style dimples, whereas these two later ones have the Chinese style. If you come up here on the feed lips, you'll notice it's welded on, and it's a thick, heavy feed lip that you're typically used to seeing on AK mags. Everything else is pretty normal for an AK mag. On the back, you have the triangle with the 66 in it. It's not a complete formed out stamp, but that's what the factory code is. On the side, they won't really go into focus, but you have some kanji symbols on this side. You have the Cyrillic backwards in for the letter I. And on this side, you have the Cyrillic F. So there's some Cyrillic markings and some kanji markings on there. Kind of interesting to see both of them on the Chinese magazine. Haven't ever been able to get a straight answer on why they share Russian markings and Chinese markings. There is very little technical data of that type on the AK in the United States. I imagine it's because very few documents have been translated over to English. I'll continue to search for information, but I haven't found out the answer to that yet. Anyway, this magazine is typical of 1950s production. In the 60s, the Chinese were attempting to ramp up their production of the AK-47. And in order to do that, they made some cuts in, or they cut some corners in manufacturing to make a magazine that would be suitable, but quicker and cheaper to make. So they did away with the welded on support or reinforcement on the feed lips, and it's just stamped. This is typical of late 50s through 60s, maybe 70s production. They also, at this time, went with the, well, I don't know what you call it other than they removed the rib from the back of the magazine. You'll also notice that the locking tab is stamped and welded on rather than machined, which is typical of all your other AK mags. And it's still spot welded down the front. Still has the Chinese style floor plate. Later on, especially for US imports, this would be typical of late 70s all the way up through when they stopped importing these magazines. They went back to a separate reinforcement that's welded on. They went back to the machined and welded locking tab. This would obviously be a lot more durable, more expensive to produce, but you'll notice on magazines that come into the US market, even between it and the Sino-Soviet, the finish is a lot better. And I don't know if they made them better for the US market or if that's just what they were doing for the military at the time. A lot of foreign export mags that we would find in Iraq were this style, but we also saw quite a few of the Sino-Soviets and the later Chinese ones as well. Moving on to the Yugoslav. The Yugoslav ones, you're going to see numbers stamped on the back. This one has a circular hole on the back of the magazine. You're going to have your ridge or your rib on the back. You can't see it on here because I have it covered up with tape and a piece of 550 cord, but you can kind of make out that there's only 2 reinforcement ribs like the Chinese mags. You'll also notice a lot of these Yugo mags will have a more square angle on the front rather than a radiused one on the other Chinese and European magazines. You'll also notice a difference in the locking tab. It's going to be wider, or not necessarily wider, but it's going to have a slightly more square appearance to it. The biggest difference between the Yugo and all other magazines, though, are that the follower actually comes up higher in the magazine, and it will actually interface with a bolt to create a bolt hold open. So kind of a neat feature. It only holds a bolt there as long as the magazine is in place. So once you take it out, the bolt slaps back forward. We'll pause for a second and I'll show you some differences here in some of these magazines real quick. Alright, so one thing that you will notice with Yugo mags is some of them will have a triangular vision hole in the back. Some will have a circular hole. These came about at different eras. If I'm correct, the triangular one was the earlier, I believe it was the earlier version, but I could have that backwards. But you will see both, and basically they just decided to change it at a certain point in time. What we're talking about with the followers, I wanted to show you here. You can see we got a Chinese one, and you can see the follower on it's completely different from the European style. But here's what I'm talking about on the back. You see how the Yugo one actually comes up higher than the Chinese one or all the other European ones. That's the part that's going to interface with that bolt. Basically how they achieve this is if you look inside here, you can see there's a stop for the follower. On the Yugo ones, they removed it, so the follower will come up higher. You can probably remove that stop from your European mags and get the follower to come up higher, but most of these, you'll notice they're just you know, it's just unfinished sheet metal on the end. So my guess is you're going to end up damaging the follower over time if you do that, whereas this one actually has a cover on the back of it, a separate piece of sheet metal that's attached to protect that end. When you look at the Romanian magazine, you'll see it has more of a Soviet style follower. And something else you'll notice too is some of the Soviet ones, the early ones, have a hole on the follower. That supposedly was to relieve vacuum suction from heavily greased magazines, but I don't really know if that's true or not. I'd imagine you'd have to have a ton of grease in there, and that would cause a lot of other problems just in the functioning of the weapon if there was that much grease in the magazine. I don't know any other reason for why there would be that hole in some of them, but the Romanian ones and most of the European ones will have this style follower, including the Russian magazines. So, since we're on to the Romanians, this is a Romanian magazine. You can't see it under here too well. Well, there you go. You can see it has a Romanian style ribs, and the floor plate is real similar to all other AK floor plates. This one has a letter B on it, right there above my finger or my thumb. A lot of these Romanian mags will have a bunch of different numbers and letters on them as proof marks. Moving over to these bakelites, these recently just came into the country. It's my understanding they were coming from Serbia. And these ones were made by Tula. When I got them, they were brand new magazines. Now, these magazines were issued to the Russian army during the Soviet-Afghan War. But they never did fully replace the steel mags, partially due to some concerns that we've heard through different gun journalism sources in the United States of Soviet soldiers being afraid that fragments from the magazines, if they were struck by fragmentation or bullets in their magazines, would not show up on X-ray. Now, I've never talked to any Russian Afghan vets about this, so I don't really know, but I could definitely understand the fear. They didn't have MRI or CAT scan machines available at the time. So if you got pieces of plastic or bakelite stuck inside of a wound, I'm sure they wouldn't show up on X-ray very well. So it could be a valid concern. And because of that, they never really fully replaced the steel magazines. Some interesting differences here on these two mags. I only ordered two of them because they were $30 a piece. Of course, generally speaking, they're a lot more than that, but I was kind of on a budget, so I had to restrain myself. You'll notice there's two different versions of these mags, and they were made by Tula, Ijevsk, and Molat. But you're looking here, one has a ridge on the back, and they're affectionately called ridgebacks, and the other one does not. They also have different mold codes. I thought it was kind of cute that this one had a 47 on it, like AK-47. Of course, it doesn't mean AK-47, it's just a mold code. And then looking at the floor plates, I got both different style of floor plates that I've seen. One with reinforcements and one that's flat. And then they put black paint over the exposed steel to protect it. These ones also have steel feed lips that are molded into the plastic or the bakelite. And then a steel locking tabs, a steel reinforcement, and you can see the reinforcement only comes down to about here. And you can see where the molding machine would have held that reinforcement as it molded around it. Another thing too, this one actually has its military acceptance stamp still on it. That's just an ink stamp that would wear off very quickly, so I'm guessing when I got these, they were unissued magazines. And that would be, it looks like in Cyrillic letters, it would be a OGK maybe, or OGN. I can't really tell if that's a Cyrillic N or a Cyrillic K. So, the next magazine is your AK-100 series, and of course this is a Bulgarian Circle 10, as they call it, and it's a clear polymer. You can see it has the same style floor plate as one of the bakelites there. It has a metal reinforcing rib that runs the entire length of the magazine. If we hold it up to the light here, there you go, you can really see it in there. And on the back, it's got a steel tab, and there's no reinforcements on the feed lips. I've done quite a bit of research into polymer mags for the 5.56 and come to realize the reason why a lot of countries decided on their clear mags to forego reinforced feed lips is that they cause more problems than they solve. Basically, to get that piece of steel in there, you got to take material away from the plastic, and I'm guessing what tends to happen is the steel eventually separates from the plastic. Something else you'll notice is there's a little bit of a micro fracture. There you go, you can see it right there. And there's another one on the opposite side, same place. They develop from this sharp corner on the front locking tab. And I was initially concerned with these, but I posted on AR15.com about it. One guy had a magazine that had cracked almost all the way through. Basically, they're cosmetic. They don't seem to affect the function of the magazine. I was a little concerned with it at first, but after talking to some other people that have shot hundreds, if not thousands, of rounds through their mags, they say there's no issues with them. It's a really common issue with these Bulgarian polymer Circle Tens. They do tend to crack right there, but it doesn't affect the functioning of the magazine. It won't split all the way through very often, and even when it does, it doesn't seem to affect it. My guess would be if it did, I would just probably pull the material apart slightly, put some super glue in it, put it back together. I'm sure it'd be good for thousands more rounds. And they still have the vision hole in the back to show when it's full, even though you can clearly see the rounds in the magazine. There's only 10 in here, but it'll hold 30. There are some Malott 45 round RPK mags floating around in 5.56, but they are very rare and very expensive. They usually go for about 200 bucks. So if you find them, be prepared to spend a lot of money to get that extra 15 rounds, but they do look pretty cool in the rifle. I don't have one yet. Maybe eventually I'll get one. They're black, and they don't have the waffle pattern. They just have horizontal ribs running the length of the magazine. Give me a second here, and I'll show you what the drum looks like. Alright, finally, we'll take a look here at the Romanian Magazine. And we have it in its Romanian pouch. It's a 75 round drum. So we'll work from the outside in. In any case, the first thing you'll notice is that these pouches actually have a vision hole. So that way you can see if the magazine's full or not. In this case it is. And that goes all the way through to the vision hole inside the magazine. So basically how this magazine pouch is going to work is you'll take it off your belt by pulling up on the tab and just pulling straight up on the pouch, so it would come off. And then you would take off the top tab and flip the cover open. Once you get the cover open, you can actually load the magazine into the rifle as is with the pouch attached. And that's kind of a handy feature because in combat you don't have a whole lot of time to reload, so it's nice that you can just take the whole pouch off your belt and load the magazine with the pouch still on into the rifle. We'll take it out of the pouch and take a look here. This is a very well constructed pouch. I got it from I believe it was AAOK Gun Parts, and they sell a lot of AK stuff. Let's see if we can do this one-handed. We'll look at the pouch first, since most of you are familiar with the drums anyway. You look inside, you have a reinforcement here, so that way the loading tab or lever, the loading lever on the magazine doesn't wear through the mag pouch. And then inside you actually have a leather cover over the back of this stud, so that way it doesn't rub on the magazine. Kind of nice that they thought of that. And then they have leather reinforcements on the grommets. There's also a grommet on the bottom, and it's just a drain hole, but those reinforcements will prevent those grommets from pulling out. And then there is an acceptance stamp, military acceptance stamp on the pouch itself, and it looks like it says 1974. So looking at the magazine, you can see it's pretty much your run-of-the-mill 75 round RPK drum. For those of you who don't know, basically how you load this is you're going to pull down on a lever for each round, and then you're going to put it on the feed lip on the top. We'll take a look real quick once I get this thing unloaded at how the internals of the magazine are constructed. So just stand by. Alright, so here's a pouch with 75 rounds in it, and they strip out of the magazine very easily, which is really nice for unloading these, because you don't want to unload it by taking the back cover off. Ask me how I know. In any case, I'm going to try and do this one-handed. You use the tip of a bullet, and this is one of the Yugoslav M67 cartridges, by the way, if you guys haven't seen them. It's really well-built ammunition. Very accurate, too. But basically, you're going to take the bullet point in there, and then you're going to rotate this knob, and it will come off. At this point, you can pull the back cover off. And you can see we got a snail track. I'll call it that because it looks like a snail shell. And that's where the rounds run. And then you got this rotor. And this rotor's in here with a clockwork spring, which I'll show you in a second. What I just dropped out of here is actually the follower. And it's a link of 3 dummy rounds. What it does is it ensures that every single last cartridge comes out of the tower on this magazine. So people ask me, you know, what are those things down in the magazine? Are they cartridges? And no, they're not. It's actually the follower. They're linked so that way they'll flex all the way down and through the magazine. So once you got the tension off the rotor, you'll push in this disassembly button again, and there's a little lever here that you're going to flip up. So it goes like that, and then you can remove the rotor itself. And right in here, you can kind of see it is a clockwork spring I was telling you about. Because of this spring, theoretically you can leave the magazine loaded indefinitely, and you won't have any issues with spring fatigue. You'll also notice that all these magazines are serial numbered, and all the parts are serial numbered to the magazine, so that way you get the right parts back in the magazine. Once you got the whole thing apart, it's pretty easy to clean it if you need to. I definitely recommend that you keep these magazines clean. If you get sand and crap in there, you know, expect at a certain point for them to stop working. So you definitely want to keep them clean. You don't really need a lot of oil, just a light coat of CLP or something else like that. You know, light oil will definitely work for you. So to reassemble it, you saw I put the rotor in. Doesn't matter what position you put it in at. Basically, you're just going to set it in there, flip the tab over, and then you're going to rotate this far enough back. And if you look, we got these rotors on here. I like to rotate it back to at least the second one. I'm trying to do this one-handed. Here, you can see what I'm doing this way. You'll take the follower, and the follower has this tab on here. And when this tab is supposed to ride on the rotor. So it's just going to slip in like this, and then you let the rotor come to rest on it inside the magazine. But you do want that tension on there. In fact, I'm going to back it up one more position. You do want tension on there, so that way it ensures that the magazine will feed properly. So we'll get that follower in there. There we go. That feels a lot better. And basically, you're just going to take your back cover, press it on, and then take the locking knob, rotate it, it'll click, and then your magazine's back together. You can load it up. The first round usually clicks in, and I can't load it one-handed, but basically to load the next round, you just push up, you see how it drops down, and you just repeat 75 times, then you have a loaded magazine. Hope you enjoyed a video on the review of all the different AK mags and pouches, and look forward to sharing some new stuff with you again in the future. Thank you for watching.